Everything comes from water, and everything is kept alive by water.
Good really captured something fundamental there, didn't he?
He certainly did. It's one of those statements that seems simple but holds so much weight.
Think about that for a moment. You, the listener, maybe even with a glass of water right now.
Yeah.
It really sets the stage for what we're diving into today.
Which is this surprisingly intricate science of water.
Exactly. With a particular focus on mineral waters, and we're drawing all this from a really comprehensive clinical nutrition review that came out recently.
And it's fascinating stuff. Water is something we often just take for granted.
Right, just turn on the tap.
But it's so much more than just H2O. So in this deep dive, we'll explore its absolutely critical role inside the human body.
Okay.
Then we'll get into the really diverse world of mineral waters, how they're classified, what makes them different.
And crucially, how they might actually impact our health.
Precisely. At different stages of life, different conditions, it all plays a role. Yeah, so we're going beyond just, drink 8 glasses a day, although that's important too, obviously.
Of course.
This is more about understanding the nuances, the subtle differences in the water you drink.
And how those details could actually contribute to your overall well-being, maybe in ways you haven't considered.
Okay, let's get into it then. Starting right at the core, water inside the human body.
Right. The essential element. It might sound obvious, but the
Yeah.
sheer scale of it is pretty remarkable.
Yeah. How much are we talking?
Well, take a typical adult male. Around 60% of his body weight is water.
60%.
Yeah, which translates to roughly 45 liters.
Wow. And where does all that water hang out? Is it evenly spread?
Not exactly. It concentrates in really vital places. Think about cerebrospinal fluid or the fluid in bone marrow, almost entirely water, like 99%.
99%. Incredible.
Blood plasma is up there too, about 85%. Even our brains.
Our brain.
Well, a surprising 75% water.
Okay, so this total body water, or TBW as the review calls it?
Yeah, we'll probably use that term, TBW.
It's not just one big pool inside us, right? It's compartmentalized.
Exactly. You got intracellular water, that's the water inside our cells. That makes up about 34% of our body weight.
Okay, inside the cells.
And then there's extracellular water outside the cells, which is about 26%.
And that extracellular water is broken down further?
It is. Most of it, about 14% of body weight, is interstitial fluid. That's the liquid bathing all our cells.
Ah, the fluid between the cells.
Right. Then you have plasma, the liquid part of blood. That's about 4%.
Okay.
And smaller amounts, like transcellular water, think synovial fluid in your joints, that's about 1%. And lymphatic fluid, also around 1%.
So these different compartments are crucial for, what, moving things around?
Absolutely. Transporting nutrients, getting rid of waste products, essential functions.
And that intracellular water, you said it's linked to our metabolically active tissue, what they call fat-free mass.
That's right. It's closely tied to things like muscle and organs.
And the review mentioned it's usually higher in men. Why is that?
Well, it generally comes down to body composition. Men typically have a higher proportion of muscle mass compared to women.
And muscle holds more water.
Exactly. More water than fat tissue does. So that contributes to men having a slightly higher overall TBW percentage, often around 60%, compared to maybe 50% or so for women.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. This percentage of water in our bodies, it doesn't stay the same throughout life, does it?
Not at all. It's constantly changing. It's quite a dynamic landscape.
How dynamic.
Think about this. A fertilized egg is about 90% water.
90%, wow.
An embryo, still very high, maybe 85%.
Right.
Newborn baby comes down a bit, but still 74% water.
Still mostly water.
Then as adults, it settles around that 55–60% mark we mentioned.
Okay.
But then as we get older, it continues to decline. An elderly man might be around 51%, and an elderly woman even lower, maybe 45%.
Wow. From almost all water down to less than half in some older adults. That's a huge shift.
It really is. And figure 1 in the review shows this change quite clearly across the lifespan.
So what does that mean practically for you listening?
It really highlights why staying consciously hydrated becomes even more important as we age. Our bodies might not signal thirst as effectively,
Right.
and that can impact energy, focus, even how medications work.
Okay, so this water isn't just sitting there. It's actively doing things, right? Performing vital functions.
Oh, absolutely. It's critical for maintaining our hydroelectrolytic balance.
Which is?
Basically, the balance of fluids and essential minerals, electrolytes, that keeps everything running smoothly.
Got it.
It's also vital for our acid-base balance, keeping our pH in the right range, and our thermal balance, how we regulate body temperature.
Like sweating to cool down.
Exactly. And then there are all the metabolic processes, breaking down food, building energy, and what the review calls plastic processes.
Plastic, like
Yeah.
building blocks.
Sort of, yeah. Think building and repairing tissues. Water is essential for all that ongoing maintenance in our bodies.
So given how crucial it is, what happens if we don't get enough? How much water loss is too much?
Even a fairly small loss, say 2% of your body weight, can start messing with your temperature regulation and blood plasma volume.
Just 2%.
Yeah. Get to around 7% loss, and things get serious.
Mm-hmm.
You could experience hallucinations,
Whoa.
and a 10% loss, well, that could be fatal.
Okay, that's serious. And we're losing water all the time, aren't we?
Constantly. Urine is the biggest route, maybe 1,500 milliliters a day on average.
Okay.
Then there's what's called insensible perspiration water, lost just through breathing and evaporation from the skin. That's about 900 milliliters.
Didn't even realize that was so much.
Yeah, it adds up. Feces account for maybe 100 milliliters, and then, of course, sweat.
Which varies a lot.
Hugely. Depends on how active you are, the temperature, humidity.
So if we're losing all this water, how do we effectively replace it? Is it just about drinking?
Drinking beverages is a big part, yes. Maybe 800 to 1,500 milliliters a day.
Okay.
But food is also a surprisingly significant source. You can get around 500 to 900 milliliters daily just from the food you eat.
Really? From food?
Absolutely. Think about fruits and vegetables. They can be up to 90% water.
Right, like watermelon or cucumber.
Exactly. Even things like pasta, while seemingly dry, still have some water, maybe 10–15%. And how you cook food can change its water content too.
Interesting.
And there's one more source. Our own bodies actually produce a small amount of water, about 350 milliliters a day, when we metabolize fats, carbs, and proteins. It's called metabolic water.
Our bodies make water.
A little bit, yeah. Fats actually yield the most, but it's not nearly enough. We absolutely need that external or exogenous water intake.
Okay, so adding it all up, for a moderately active adult, what's a rough daily target to stay balanced?
The review suggests around 2,500 milliliter total, but there's a range, maybe 1,500 to 3,000 milliliter, depending on the person and conditions.
And for someone less active, just resting.
A general guideline is about 1 milliliter of water per kilocalorie consumed. Often that works out to around 1,500 milliliter just to cover that insensible loss and waste elimination.
Now, the review specifically calls out children and the elderly as being at higher risk of deficiency. What's going on there?
With kids, several factors are at play. They have a larger body surface area compared to their size, a higher percentage of TBW to begin with, and their water turnover rate is faster.
Okay.
Plus, their kidneys aren't as developed, and so they can't concentrate urine as effectively. Their needs can be quite high, up to 1.5 milliliters per kilocalorie per day. Even a tiny baby needs a minimum of about 300 milliliters daily.
Wow, that's a lot, relatively. And the elderly.
Their risk comes from a different angle. Often, the thirst sensation becomes less sensitive with age.
So they might not feel thirsty even when they need water.
Exactly. And sometimes mobility issues or reduced self-sufficiency can make it harder to just get a drink, even though their basic water needs are similar to younger adults.
What about during pregnancy or breastfeeding? Clearly increased demands there.
Definitely. During pregnancy, an extra 30 milliliters of water per day is needed, mainly for amniotic fluid and fetal growth.
Okay, 30 milliliters extra.
But breastfeeding requires a much bigger jump, around 650 to 700 milliliters extra per day.
That's a lot.
It is. It's crucial for making enough milk and keeping both mom and baby healthy and hydrated.
This brings up an interesting point from the review about using mineral waters for baby formula. It mentioned a shift away from diluted vaccine milk.
Right. Modern powdered formulas are really carefully designed to mimic breast milk composition.
Okay.
So the general advice now is to prepare them using waters with very low mineral content.
Why low mineral?
It helps maintain the formula's intended balance and avoids putting too much osmotic load on the baby's kidneys, which are still developing.
Osmotic load, like too many dissolved salts.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
And there's even some emerging research hinting at a possible link between really concentrated or hyperosmolar diets in infancy and a higher risk of obesity and high blood pressure later in life.
That is surprising. But what about the opposite concern? Could using low mineral water cause a calcium deficiency?
The review suggests the evidence doesn't really support that fear. It points out that animals often drink naturally soft water, like rainwater, which is low in minerals, without issues. However, one thing to be really careful about with water for infants and also during pregnancy and breastfeeding is the nitrate content.
Nitrates.
Yes, the recommendation is to keep it below 10 milligrams per liter. Higher levels could lead to methemoglobinemia.
Methemoglobinemia.
Right.
What's that?
It's a condition where the blood can't carry oxygen properly. So low nitrate is important.
Good to know. Okay, shifting gears slightly, what about exercise? Our water needs definitely go up then, right?
Dramatically.
I
We
know.
lose a lot through sweat. But interestingly, our thirst mechanism during exercise often doesn't keep up.
Really? You feel thirsty, you drink, but it's not enough.
Often, yes. The review notes we might only replace about half the fluid lost through sweat just by drinking when we feel thirsty.
Huh.
So for athletes, calculating needs is more important, something like 45 to 50 milliliters per kilogram of body weight per day, adjusted for their diet and urine output.
And what about when we're sick? Things like diarrhea, vomiting, fever.
Absolutely. Any condition causing major fluid loss significantly increases your water needs.
Yeah, so.
And in places with poor hygiene, severe dehydration from things like food poisoning can be incredibly dangerous, especially for kids. The review mentions degrees of dehydration slight is 5% body weight loss, moderate 10%, and serious is 15%.
15% loss. That's getting close to that fatal level you mentioned earlier.
It is. It highlights how critical fluid replacement is in those situations.
So our body has this whole complex system to manage water balance. What are the key parts involved?
You've got primary and secondary structures. The primary ones include the thirst centers in the brain.
Telling us to drink.
Right. The digestive system, which absorbs water. The cardiovascular system distributing it. A hormone called ADH, antidiuretic hormone.
ADH.
Yeah, it tells the kidneys to hold on to water. And the kidneys themselves, filtering waste and controlling urine volume.
Okay, those are the primary ones. What about secondary?
Those are mainly involved in water loss, the respiratory system, through breathing, and the skin, through evaporation and sweat.
The review also talked about regulative versus non-regulative water intake. What's the difference there?
Regulative intake is driven by your body's actual need for water.
Okay, like feeling thirsty because you're dehydrated.
Exactly. That's primary thirst.
Yeah.
Then there's secondary or anticipatory thirst, maybe feeling thirsty around meal times, which is more of a learned response.
Ah, okay. So what's non-regulative?
That's drinking that isn't directly tied to immediate hydration needs. It could be just habitual drinking or drinking for specific therapeutic reasons.
Like taking mineral water for a specific effect?
Precisely. That's usually considered non-regulative. Or, in some cases, pathological drinking, like potomania, where there's an excessive urge to drink water.
It's quite sobering, though, when the review touches on the global picture of water resources. The inequality is stark.
It really is. Lack of access to clean water is a massive public health issue in many parts of the world, impacting health, mortality, development.
And even in developed countries, like Italy mentioned in the review, there are issues with waste.
Yes, significant losses from leaky pipes in the distribution system, plus wasteful habits at home. Tables 1 and 2 in the review really highlight this.
So things you can do, like fixing leaks, being mindful, it adds up.
It definitely can contribute, yes.
Yeah.
Every little bit helps towards sustainability.
And the broader situation isn't getting better, is it? With climate change and other factors?
Unfortunately, no. Decreased rainfall in some areas, pollution, overdrawing groundwater, it's all putting pressure on resources. The FAO even estimates global water needs could double every 21 years.
Double every 21 years. That's a worrying thought.
It underscores the urgency of managing water resources better.
Okay, let's shift focus now to the second main area. Drinking waters and mineral waters specifically. How is the quality of regular drinking water assessed?
It undergoes really rigorous testing, physicochemical analysis, biological tests, checks for organic compounds.
Just to make sure it's safe.
Exactly. Water is only considered safe if everything falls within established limits. These limits are based on long-term daily consumption and potential toxicity. The review mentions Italian regulations and broader EC directives that set these standards.
And these rules apply to tap water, bottled water.
Generally, yes. Waters intended for drinking, cooking, domestic use, food industry use, whether from the network, tankers, or bottles.
Okay, so there's drinking water, then the review distinguishes spring water.
Right. Spring water comes from a specific underground source, and crucially, it has to be bottled at the source. It can't be transported in bulk tankers first.
Ah, bottled at source, that's key.
And then you also have regenerated or processed waters, things like demineralized water that then has minerals added back, or flavored waters.
Now, the term mineral water seems to have a more specific, almost legal meaning, right? Especially historically.
Yes, that's true. An old Italian decree from 1919 actually required mineral water to have peculiar therapeutic properties. because it was intended for healing.
Therapeutic properties, so it's not just any water with minerals in it.
Not according to the official definition, no.
So what is the current definition?
Based on EEC directives, natural mineral water has to come from an underground source, be protected from contamination, and be microbiologically wholesome.
Okay. Pure at the source.
It also needs to have a stable chemical composition and, importantly, demonstrate favorable effects on health. And like spring water, it must be bottled at the source in safe containers.
So that favorable effects on health part is key. It needs some kind of recognized benefit.
Exactly. Just containing minerals isn't enough to be called mineral water in this regulated sense without those recognized properties.
And who recognizes these properties?
The Ministry of Health, usually after reviewing clinical and pharmacological studies, Table 3 in the review shows that different permissions needed mineral waters face stricter requirements than spring waters.
It feels like consumers often choose mineral water because they worry about tap water safety, maybe contamination. Is that perception driving things?
It likely plays a role. The review mentions a Swiss study that found pesticide contamination in a chunk of their drinking water samples.
Pesticides. Yeah, that would make people worry.
And the review briefly touches on potential nervous system impacts of pesticides. So, while tap water regulations are generally tight, these kinds of findings can fuel consumer preference for bottled sources perceived as safer.
What about chlorination? That's another common concern with tap water.
There are discussions about potential byproducts like haloderivatives that might form during chlorination, and some studies link those to intestinal issues.
Right.
But the review puts it in perspective. The amount of chloride, sodium, or potassium you actually get from drinking chlorinated water is tiny compared to what you get from your food, like salt.
Ah, okay, so the dietary intake dwarfs the water contribution for those minerals.
Generally, yes.
But within mineral waters themselves, the mineral content can vary wildly, right? Especially things like magnesium and calcium.
Oh, hugely.
Huh?
Magnesium might range from just 1 milligram per liter up to 50. Calcium can be just a few milligrams or go as high as 400 milligrams per liter.
400. That's a lot.
It is. And the review points out that for people whose diets might be low in calcium, certain mineral waters can actually be a really useful source. It cites a few studies on that.
And Italy apparently is just full of these springs.
Exceptionally rich. Around 700 recognized springs, with about 300 being actively marketed under nearly 300 different brand names.
Okay, that leads us perfectly into the third big topic.
Yeah.
How these different mineral waters are classified, what their characteristics are, and what they might be indicated for. It sounds like a pretty detailed system.
It is quite structured. Broadly, you can think of natural mineral waters in 3 groups.
Okay.
You have table waters, the ones most people drink daily. Then dietetic waters used for specific needs like salt restoration, low sodium diets, or boosting calcium.
Right.
And finally, healing waters. These have officially recognized pharmacological or clinical properties and are often used in thermal spas for prevention or treatment.
And how are they classified within those groups? What are the key factors?
Several things. The spring's flow rate, the water temperature, its freezing point, the dry residue amount.
Dry residue again. We'll come back to that.
Yes. Also the main ions present and its main biological effect, like diuretic or cathartic.
Okay, flow rate makes sense as a consistent. Temperature, too, you mentioned some are hot.
Exactly. Flow can be perennial, stable, semi-perennial, fluctuating, or seasonal. Temperature-wise, under 20 degrees is cold, over 20 degrees is thermal, and thermal is further split into tepid, warm, and hot.
And freezing point, how does that classify water?
It relates to the concentration of dissolved stuff, the osmotic pressure. So it helps classify waters as isotonic, hypertonic, or hypertonic relative to body fluids.
Okay, now dry residue, I see that on labels sometimes. What exactly is it measuring?
It's literally the amount of minerals in milligrams left over after you evaporate 1 liter of the water at 180 degrees Celsius. It's a measure of total mineralization.
Ah, okay, total dissolved solids.
Pretty much. And it's a key classification. Very low mineral is under 50 millimoles. Low minerals is 50 to 500. Medium is 500 to 1500. And rich in minerals is over 1,500 millimoles.
So it's quite a range. It's not just high or low mineral.
No, it's graded. And this dry residue amount is distinct from the type of minerals present.
Right, which is the next classification based on the predominant ions like bicarbonate or sulfate.
Exactly. There's an older classification by Murata and Sika focusing on the main anions, bicarbonate, sulfate, chloride, sulfurous. Waters can also be mixed types.
Okay.
The current Italian system looks more at the dominant chemical elements and their known biological effects. So it's classified as bicarbonate water if it has over 600 millimoles of bicarbonate, sulfate if over 200 millimoles of sulfate, calcium if over 150 millimoles of calcium, and so on.
There are specific thresholds.
Yes. And there are other labels too, like low salt if sodium is under 20 millimoles,
Yeah.
plus distinctions based on fizz, CO2 content, or even radioactivity, radon.
And the last classification type was biological activity.
Right. Directly related to the effects diuretic, increases urine, cathartic, laxative, anti-inflammatory, or reconstituent, like iron-rich waters.
Wow, okay, that's a lot of ways to classify water. And all this information, or at least the key parts, should be on the bottle label.
Absolutely. Labels have legally required info producer, batch, date, etc. But they also carry that second type of information that helps you choose, like the mineral analysis and any recognized properties.
And what about safety? Does mineral water have to be sterile?
Not sterile, but microbiologically wholesome, meaning no harmful bugs, but it will contain its natural, harmless microbial flora.
So some bacteria are expected and okay.
Yes, the natural ones. And the review notes that some multiplication of this natural flora during normal storage isn't considered harmful. There are guidelines for proper storage, of course.
Cool, dry, dark place.
Basically, yes. Away from odors, too. Yeah. And they stress opening it fresh in restaurants.
Good point. It's good that the bottles are recyclable too.
Definitely. And remember, those two terms, mineral, implying potential health effects, and microbiologically wholesome, are key to the definition.
Is the testing different for mineral water compared to tap water?
It's actually stricter in terms of frequency because mineral water can't be purified in ways that change its composition, so it's tested multiple times a year at the source.
Okay. And there's oversight.
Yes, from health authorities and inspectors. Plus, the producers have their own approved self-monitoring systems with frequent tests.
Right, let's dig into the properties now, based on that dry residue classification. Very low, low, medium, rich.
Okay. Very low mineral waters under 50 milliliters, about 9% of the market, are known for being diuretic.
Good for flushing things out.
Potentially, yes. Indicated sometimes for urinary stones, helping clear uric acid. And because they're low sodium, they're suitable for infant formula prep and people managing hypertension.
Okay, then low mineral, 50 to 500 milliliters.
That's the biggest category, about 65%. Also diuretic, also indicated for urinary stones and gout by helping clear uric acid and urea.
And medium mineral, 500 to 1500.
About 20% of the market. Similar indications, still diuretic, though the effect tends to lessen as the mineral content goes up.
Interesting. Less diuretic the more minerals there are.
Generally, yes, because the osmotic difference driving water out might be less pronounced.
And the last category, rich in mineral salts, over 1500 milliliters.
That's only about 6% of the market.
Yeah.
These are really considered medicinal waters due to their high mineral concentrations,
Yeah.
often used therapeutically.
Okay. Now, what about the effects based on the type of dominant mineral, like bicarbonate or sulfate? These seem more targeted.
They definitely are. Bicarbonate waters, for instance, can neutralize stomach acid.
Good for heartburn or reflux?
Potentially, yes. They can also speed up gastric emptying and trigger the release of certain gut hormones. For athletes, they can help restore fluids and salts, buffer exercise-induced aphid, and clear nitrogen waste.
How about sulfate waters?
Their main action is stimulating the intestines, so primarily used for chronic constipation. There are also sulfate bicarbonate types used for gallbladder issues.
Okay. What else?
Sulfurous and bicarbonate waters might have roles in diabetes management. Chloride sodium water, salty ones, stimulate gut movement and bile flow, so used for constipation or biliary problems.
And calcium-rich waters?
Important when calcium needs are higher growing kids, pregnancy, menopause, preventing osteoporosis. Might also help with blood pressure.
Magnesium?
Mainly known as cathartic, so laxative effect. But also linked potentially to preventing atherosclerosis and helping with PMS or menopause symptoms.
Ferrous waters? For iron?
Exactly. Used for iron deficiency anemia?
There were others too. Sulfurous, iodine, bromine.
Yes, those are often used more externally or via inhalation. Think of dermal spa treatments for ENT issues, respiratory problems, some skin conditions, gynecological inflammation.
Carbonic waters? Fizzy ones?
Mainly used in baths for peripheral circulation issues, though generally fizzy waters quench thirst well, and if they're bicarbonate, they can aid digestion.
That's a huge list of potential effects, and some of these can actually be stated on the bottle label if approved.
Yes, the Ministry of Health recognizes certain claims based on evidence, like maybe diuretic, maybe laxative, stimulates digestion, may facilitate hepatobiliary functions, suitable for infant food, suitable prefer low-sodium diets.
So if you're aiming for one of these effects, how should you actually drink the water? Is there a specific method?
The review mentions two main ways: water loading and subdivided doses.
Water loading sounds intense.
It involves drinking a lot, maybe a liter fairly quickly on an empty stomach, sometimes with an extra amount based on body weight, often used for diuretic waters, especially for kidney stones.
Okay. And subdivided doses.
That's drinking smaller amounts spread throughout the day, maybe 1 to 2 liters total, usually on an empty stomach. Sometimes advised to sip while walking lightly. For some people, like those with low blood pressure, drinking lying down might enhance the effects.
Temperature matters too.
Often recommended at natural spring temperature or slightly warmed. Using a standard measure like a 250 milliliter glass can help track intake.
Are there specific protocols for certain conditions, like using diuretic waters for kidney stones?
Yes. For kidney stones, the goal with low-medium mineral diuretic water is usually high volume, at least 2 liters over 24 hours, often using loading or subdivided doses. Bicarbonate alkaline waters for urinary tract inflammation are usually taken in subdivided doses, and the peak diuretic effect might take days, with metabolic changes over weeks.
And cathartic waters for constipation.
Those are usually salt, sulfate, or sulfurous types. Dosage varies smaller amounts if it's highly mineralized, maybe 1.5 liters if it's lower mineral, typically taken cold or warm first thing in the morning on an empty stomach.
What about those specialized ones, like arsenical ferrous or for stomach issues?
Arsenical ferrous waters need careful dosing based on concentration, usually diluted and taken on an empty stomach. For stomach issues, cold fizzy bicarbonate water in sips might help low acid, while warm bicarbonate water in moderate doses, maybe with meals, could help with high acid or digestion.
And low mineral bicarbonate water for gout.
Right. The idea there is to boost urine output, clear uric acid, and make the urine more alkaline to help lower blood uric acid levels.
Are there any general timing tips, like drinking before bed?
Yes, drinking some fluid before bed can help prevent urine becoming too concentrated overnight, which is relevant for stone formers. And generally, sipping fluids throughout the day, between meals too, is advised.
Can you get the same effect just drinking bottled water at home versus going to a spa?
Bottled waters are great for continuing therapy at home, but the review does note that the spa environment itself can be beneficial, and also that long bottling times might slightly alter the properties of some waters, especially bicarbonate ones.
Okay. And lastly, for athletes, the hydration advice seems very specific.
It is. Timing is key. Drinking low-medium mineral water in the couple of hours before exercise, specific amounts at intervals, then sipping frequently during, and importantly, replacing more than the weight lost after exercise, about 150% of the loss.
And a general daily target.
Around 50 milliliters per kilograms of body weight per day is a good starting point for athletes. The review also mentions using very low or low mineral waters for a diuretic effect in weight category sports, though actual diuretic drugs are banned, of course.
Crucially, though, not every water is right for everyone. There are contraindications.
Definitely. Low mineral waters might be bad if you have fluid retention or severe kidney heart issues. High sodium water is a no for hypertension. Salt water isn't good for ulcers or high stomach acid. Sulfurous water can be bad for certain respiratory conditions. Bicarbonate isn't ideal for very low stomach acid. Sulfate waters aren't great if you have ulcerative digestive diseases. So choosing wisely matters.
Absolutely. This has been incredibly detailed. The science is complex. The review wraps up by touching on how this is studied.
Yeah, it notes the shift from just observation towards more rigorous experimental studies since the 1950s. And the Ministry of Health actually has guidelines for what these studies need to include. Proper methodology, details on the study groups, the water dosage, treatment length, how effects were measured, statistical analysis, side effects, long-term follow-up. Pretty thorough requirements.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive then, the big takeaway seems to be water is fundamental, yes, but mineral waters are incredibly diverse. It's not just about hydration.
Absolutely. It's about the specific composition, the types and amounts of minerals, the temperature, the pH, all potentially triggering distinct physiological responses. It goes way beyond just minerals are good for you.
And for you listening, hopefully you now have a much deeper appreciation for the science packed into that simple glass of water.
Which leads to a final thought for you to ponder. Knowing all of this, understanding the classifications and potential effects, how might making a more conscious choice about the water you drink become maybe a subtle but significant part of managing your own health and well-being?
Yeah, maybe take a closer look at the label next time you pick up a bottle. What's actually in your water?
It's exactly. The deep dive definitely continues. Research keeps uncovering more about water's vital role. Thanks for joining us as we explored this fascinating topic.